I sat in the glass-walled conference room at DataCurrent, watching the CFO slide a layoff notice across the table. Gerald Hoffman looked at me with false sympathy. "Budget cuts mean you're out," he said. I didn't protest. I was exhausted from 3 years of carrying this company's entire technical infrastructure alone. Through the glass, I saw the lead investor, Thomas Caldwell, entering with 2 board members. He opened the term sheet. His face drained of color. His chair rolled backward and crashed into the wall. "The key person insurance is on her," he shouted. The conference room door burst open. Thomas came charging in with Patricia Young and Stephen Brooks, the other 2 board members, right behind him. Their faces were twisted with panic and fury. "What the hell is this?" Thomas yelled at Gerald. His voice carried through the entire office. People were standing up at their desks, staring through the glass walls. Gerald's confident demeanor crumbled. His face went pale. I just sat there, the layoff notice still in my hand, completely confused about what was happening. Patricia slammed a document on the table. This company took out a $2 million key person insurance policy on Amber 2 years ago. If she leaves within 5 years, the policy pays out, but it triggers a clause requiring immediate repayment of all investor capital plus 20% penalties. Stephen was pacing back and forth. "Do you understand what this means? We're talking about $12 million. The company would be bankrupt by Monday." I felt my heart racing. A key person insurance policy. On me. Nobody had ever told me about this. Thomas turned to me, his anger instantly transforming into a desperate smile. "Amber, we made a mistake. You're not actually laid off. This was just a misunderstanding." I looked at the layoff notice in my hand. It had my name typed at the top. It was dated today. It was signed by Gerald and countersigned by Thomas himself. For 3 years, I had worked 80-hour weeks at this company. I had built their entire cloud infrastructure from scratch. I had debugged critical systems at 2 in the morning. I had missed my sister's wedding because of a product launch. I had sacrificed relationships, health, and sleep. And in all that time, every innovation I created was credited to someone else in board meetings. Every technical decision I made was questioned and second-guessed. Every time I asked for additional engineering headcount, I was told the budget didn't allow it, but they had budget for a $2 million insurance policy on my life. I stood up slowly. "I need 48 hours to think about this," I said. Thomas reached out like he was going to grab my arm. "Amber, please, let's talk about this reasonably." I pulled away from him. 48 hours. Then I walked out of that conference room with as much dignity as I could manage. My hands were shaking as I drove to the coffee shop where my best friend Jenna Torres had agreed to meet me. Jenna still worked at DataCurrent in product management. We had started there the same month 3 years ago. She was already at a corner table when I arrived. One look at my face, and she stood up and hugged me. What happened? I told her everything. The firing, the insurance policy, the panic. Jenna's expression darkened. "Amber, I need to tell you something. I've been debating whether to say anything, but now I have to." "What is it?" "After you left today, I was walking past the executive conference room. Gerald and Thomas were arguing, loud enough that I could hear through the door." "What were they saying?" Jenna lowered her voice. Thomas was furious. He kept saying, "How could you be so stupid? We had a plan." And Gerald said something about how they just needed to document performance issues first, then force you out in a way that wouldn't trigger the insurance clause. My stomach dropped. They weren't just firing me incompetently. This was calculated. "There's more," Jenna continued. "Gerald said they had already talked to lawyers about making it look like you abandoned your position voluntarily. Something about constructive dismissal without actual termination. I felt sick. They were planning to steal from me, to manipulate the situation so I would quit, so they could avoid the insurance penalty, and I would get nothing." Jenna reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "What are you going to do?" I thought about the 3 years I had given to this company. I thought about every night I had stayed late, while Gerald left at 5. I thought about every weekend I had spent fixing problems while Thomas was on his yacht posting photos on social media. I'm going to make them pay, I said. I spent the next 2 days ignoring calls from Data Current. Gerald called 6 times, Thomas called 4 times. Even Patricia left a voicemail trying to sound sympathetic and understanding. Instead, I was sitting in the office of Diana Shepard, an employment attorney who specialized in tech industry disputes. She came highly recommended by a former colleague who had sued a different startup for wrongful termination. Diana was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an organized desk. She had listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "The insurance policy is interesting," she said when I finished. "It's worth $2 million to the company, but that's not your only leverage." "What do you mean?" "You mentioned unvested stock options. How much?" I did the math in my head. At the last valuation, probably around $300,000 worth. Diana nodded. "So if they fire you before those vest, you lose that money. But if the insurance clause triggers, they lose everything. That's significant leverage. What should I ask for?" Diana thought for a moment. "I would propose $1.5 million cash, full immediate vesting of all stock options, a glowing reference letter, and a mutual non-disparagement agreement." I stared at her. "They'll never agree to that." "Maybe not, but we start high. Let me draft the proposal." 3 days after my firing, I walked back into Data Current's office building. Diana was beside me, carrying a leather briefcase. We were escorted to the large executive conference room on the top floor. Thomas, Gerald, Patricia, Stephen, and a lawyer I didn't recognize were all sitting on one side of the table. The lawyer introduced himself as Howard Kemp from Whitfield and Associates. Diana presented our proposal. She spoke calmly and professionally, laying out each term with precision. The room exploded before she even finished. "This is extortion," Thomas yelled. His face was red. "You can't be serious." Gerald's hands were clenched into fists on the table. $1.5 million? For what? For doing your job? Howard held up a hand. "Let's take a break." Everyone calmed down. During the break, Howard pulled Diana and me aside in the hallway. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You seem like a reasonable person, Amber. Let me be direct with you. If you don't accept a reasonable settlement, this company will make your life very difficult." "What does that mean?" "It means we have documentation of performance issues, multiple documented instances of missed deadlines, quality problems, interpersonal conflicts with team members." My mouth fell open. "That's not true." "None of that is true," Howard shrugged. "Nevertheless, it's documented, dated, signed by multiple witnesses. So I suggest you think carefully about whether you want to pursue this path." I felt Diana's hand on my arm, steadying me. "We'll consider your position," Diana said coldly. Back in the conference room, the negotiation continued for 4 more hours. It was brutal. Every term we proposed was met with anger or condescension. Every compromise we offered was rejected or countered with something insulting. Finally, as the sun was setting outside the windows, Howard made what he called their final offer: $600,000. Partial vesting of stock options equivalent to 1 more year. Standard reference letter. No non-disparagement agreement. Diana and I asked for a private consultation room. Once we were alone, she spoke first. "I think we should reject this and file legal claims. The insurance clause gives us enormous leverage. We can do better." I nodded. I was about to agree when I heard something through the thin walls of the consultation room. It was Gerald's voice, muffled but recognizable. He was on the phone in the hallway just outside. "Yes, the documentation is ready. We'll file the fraud report with the SEC tomorrow. Once she's under investigation, she'll take anything we offer." I grabbed Diana's arm. "Did you hear that?" Her face went pale. "Oh God. They're not just threatening me with fake performance reviews. They're planning to accuse me of securities fraud or embezzlement or something criminal. They're going to claim I falsified reports or stole money. And once I'm under federal investigation, I'll be so desperate to make it stop that I'll accept whatever they offer." Diana sat down heavily. "This changes everything. If they file a complaint with the SEC, even a false one, it could take years to clear your name. The legal costs alone would be devastating." "I'm not just fighting for money anymore," I said quietly. "I'm fighting to stay out of prison." The letter arrived the next morning. It was from Whitfield and Associates on thick cream-colored stationery with embossed letterhead. My hands shook as I read it. Data Current Technologies was formally accusing me of multiple crimes: falsifying performance metrics in reports to investors, misappropriating company resources for personal projects, conspiring to trigger the key person insurance payout for personal financial gain. The letter stated they had filed formal complaints with both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the State Attorney General's office. Attached to the letter were 40 pages of evidence, emails that appeared to show me inflating user numbers before investor presentations, expense reports that looked like I had charged personal travel to the company, Slack messages that seemed to show me discussing how to teach them a lesson with people I didn't recognize. I called Diana immediately. She came to my apartment within an hour. She spread the documents across my kitchen table and examined them carefully. After 20 minutes, she looked up at me with a grim expression. "These are sophisticated forgeries. The email headers have been altered. The expense report signatures are digital manipulations. The Slack messages are from accounts that don't match actual employee records." "But will anyone believe that?" Diana rubbed her temples. "The problem is that proving forgery takes time and money, expert witnesses, digital forensics. And while we're fighting to prove these are fake, you're under investigation for federal crimes." Within 24 hours, the story leaked to TechBurst, a major industry publication that covered startup news and scandals. The headline made me want to vomit. Data Current VP accused of fraud in insurance scheme. The article repeated all of Data Current's accusations as facts. It included quotes from an anonymous source calling me a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. It mentioned the $2 million insurance policy like I had somehow orchestrated it myself. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Former colleagues were texting me asking if it was true. Some were supportive. Most were distancing themselves. I had 2 job interviews scheduled that week with other tech companies. Both were canceled without explanation. My LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments. Some people defended me, but many more called me a fraud, a thief, a liar. That evening, my mother called. Her voice was shaking. "Amber, 2 FBI agents came to the house today. They were asking questions about you, about whether you had financial problems, about whether you had ever talked about getting revenge on your employer." "Mom, it's okay. I didn't do anything wrong." "I know that, honey. But I'm scared." "I'm scared too," I wanted to say, but I didn't. The legal defense was going to cost a fortune. Diana estimated at least $200,000 to properly defend against the SEC investigation and the potential criminal charges. I had $70,000 in savings. That was it. Diana knew a litigation funding company that might help, but they wanted 40% of any eventual settlement or judgment. I had no choice. I signed the agreement. My credit cards started maxing out. Diana's retainer alone was $50,000. Expert witness deposits were another $30,000. Court filing fees, copying costs, travel expenses for depositions, it all added up faster than I could track. 2 weeks after the accusations went public, my landlord knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable. "Amber, I received an anonymous tip that you're under federal investigation. I can't have that kind of situation in my building. I'm going to need you to vacate within 60 days. That's not legal. You can't evict me for being accused of something." He handed me a notice. "My lawyer says I can. I'm sorry." Jenna stopped returning my calls. I texted her asking what was wrong. Finally, she replied, "HR sent out a memo threatening termination for anyone who has contact with you during the investigation. I'm sorry. I have student loans. I can't lose my job." My boyfriend Derek came over that night. We had been together for 18 months. I thought he was someone I could rely on. He sat on my couch and wouldn't make eye contact. I need some space while this gets sorted out. You're leaving me? I'm not leaving you. I just need time to process everything that's happening. I felt something break inside me. Get out. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment. It was late. The city lights glowed through my windows. I thought about how completely isolated I had become. Everyone was abandoning me. My job was gone. My reputation was destroyed. My savings were evaporating. I was probably going to lose my apartment. I broke down crying on my kitchen floor. For the first time, I wondered if I should just give up. Accept whatever deal they offered. Sign whatever papers they wanted. Disappear somewhere and start over with a new name. At 2 a.m, my laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender was an encrypted email address I didn't recognize. The subject line was empty. I almost deleted it as spam. But something made me open it. Inside was a single PDF attachment. The file name was Data Current Internal Audit March 2024. I opened the file. It was a financial audit conducted by an outside firm 6 months ago. The report detailed significant discrepancies in Data Current's accounts. Over $1.3 million in payments to a vendor called Hillside Consulting, LLC. The audit noted that Hillside had provided no deliverables, no invoices with detailed work descriptions, and no evidence of actual services rendered. The audit recommended immediate investigation and potential legal action. At the bottom of the PDF was a note in a text box. They're framing you to cover this up. The insurance payout would have exposed the missing money. Check Hillside Consulting, LLC. I sat staring at my laptop screen for a long time. Then I started researching. Hillside Consulting, LLC was registered in Delaware 2 years ago. The registered agent was a corporate services company that specialized in creating shell businesses, but buried in the state records was a name. Paul Brennan, listed as the sole owner. I searched for Paul Brennan and found him on social media. His privacy settings were loose. His photos were public. There were dozens of pictures from the last 2 years. A yacht in the Caribbean, a new Mercedes S-Class, luxury vacations in Dubai, Santorini, and Bali, pictures of expensive watches and bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly rent. And in 3 of the photos, Paul was tagged with another person. Gerald's wife, Susan Hoffman. I dug deeper into the connections and found it. Paul Brennan was Gerald's brother-in-law, Susan's younger brother. I pulled up Data Current's vendor payment records that I still had access to from my old company laptop. They hadn't revoked my credentials yet, probably an oversight in all the chaos. Over 2 years, Data Current had paid Hillside Consulting $1.3 million for security consulting services. The payments went out monthly. $50,000, sometimes $60,000. Always with vague invoice descriptions like network security audit or infrastructure assessment. I had been VP of engineering. I would have known if we were using an outside security consultant. We had never used Hillside Consulting for anything. Gerald had been stealing from the company. He had been embezzling money through his brother-in-law's fake consulting firm, and I was being framed to cover it up. I called Diana at 7 a.m. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. I found something. Gerald's embezzling. Over $1 million. I sent her everything. The audit. The Hillside records. Paul Brennan's social media. The connection to Gerald's wife. Diana called me back 30 minutes later. She sounded wide awake now. This is explosive. But Amber, it also makes this situation much more dangerous. What do you mean? If Gerald is embezzling, he's desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. We need to be very careful how we handle this. What should we do? I'm going to contact an SEC investigator I know. Someone I trust. But this kind of investigation takes time. We're talking months, maybe longer. I don't have months. They're destroying my life right now. I know. Let me make some calls. That afternoon, I was at Diana's office reviewing documents when my phone rang. It was my neighbor from the apartment building. Amber, I think someone broke into your place. Your door is open and I can hear sounds inside. Call the police. I'm on my way. Diana drove me home. We got there just as two police officers were leaving my building. They told me nothing had been stolen, but someone had definitely been inside. The lock wasn't broken, so they either picked it or had a key. I walked into my apartment with my heart pounding. Everything looked normal at first. Then I saw my laptop on the kitchen table. It was open. I always closed it. I checked the file access logs. Someone had opened dozens of my personal files, my financial records, my tax returns, my emails. Then I saw the note on the kitchen counter. It was typed on plain white paper. Stop digging, or everyone you love gets hurt. Underneath the note was a photograph. It was my younger sister, Emma. She was 24 years old and lived in Brooklyn. The photo showed her leaving her apartment building, taken from across the street. It was from yesterday. I recognized the coat she was wearing. Someone had been following my sister. I called Emma immediately. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding happy and carefree. Hey, what's up? I didn't want to scare her, but I had to warn her. Emma, I need you to be really careful right now. Don't go anywhere alone. Vary your route to work. Pay attention to anyone who might be following you. What? Why? What's going on? I gave her the briefest possible explanation. She went quiet for a long time. Amber, this sounds really serious. Should I go to the police? The police can't help. Not yet. Just please be careful. After I hung up, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello? Amber. It was Gerald's voice, cold and flat. We need to talk. I don't have anything to say to you. I know you have the audit. I know what you think you've discovered. You're a thief. You've been stealing from your own company. Gerald laughed. It didn't sound natural. You're not understanding the situation you're in. This isn't a game you can win. What do you want? I'm offering you a deal. One-time offer. You sign a statement saying you fabricated the fraud accusations against me. You leave the country for 6 months. Some kind of sabbatical, personal journey, whatever story you want to tell. And what do I get? All legal actions against you are dropped. The SEC complaint is withdrawn. The criminal investigations stop. You get your reputation back eventually. And if I refuse? There was a pause. Your sister looks happy in Brooklyn. It would be a shame if something happened to her. My blood went cold. You're threatening my family? I'm offering you a choice. You have 24 hours to decide. The line went dead. I was shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. Diana took it from my hands. We're going to the FBI, she said. Right now. But what about Emma? What if he actually hurts her? Diana pulled out her own phone. I'm calling someone, a former client who works in private security. He can get protection for your sister within 2 hours. What about Thomas and the other investors? Do they know what Gerald's doing? Diana shook her head slowly. I don't think so. I think Gerald's acting alone now. He's trying to protect his embezzlement scheme, and he's willing to do anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Gerald's threat, about Emma, about how completely out of control this situation had become. At 3 a.m, I received another encrypted email from the same unknown sender. This time, there was no attachment, just a message. We should talk. I have information you need. I'm someone who got hurt by Gerald too. Meet me at the coffee shop on 52nd in Lexington tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone, but tell your lawyer where you're going. I'll be wearing a blue scarf. I showed the message to Diana first thing in the morning. It could be a trap, she warned. Or it could be the break we need. At 9:55, I walked into the coffee shop. It was a busy weekday morning. People in business suits were ordering lattes and checking their phones. A woman in her early 40s sat at a corner table. She wore a blue scarf. She looked nervous. I sat down across from her. Who are you? Nicole Bradford. I used to be Data Current's chief financial officer. I remembered hearing that name. You left the company about 8 months ago. I didn't leave. Gerald forced me out. Why? Nicole looked around the coffee shop before speaking quietly. Because I discovered his embezzlement. I found the Hillside consulting payments. I started asking questions about what services they were providing. Gerald panicked and fired me. Why didn't you report it? Nicole's eyes filled with tears. He blackmailed me. He fabricated evidence that I had committed tax fraud involving my elderly father's finances. My dad is 78 years old and has dementia. Gerald said if I reported the embezzlement, he would make sure my father went to prison for tax evasion. So I stayed quiet. Why are you coming forward now? Because he's doing the same thing to you that he did to me. And I've spent the last 8 months gathering evidence. I've been waiting for the right moment. Nicole pulled out a small external hard drive from her purse and slid it across the table. What is this? Copies of all the fake Hillside invoices. Recordings of Gerald discussing the embezzlement scheme with Paul. Email chains showing how they structured the payments. Proof that Gerald forged board meeting minutes to cover up the payments. I stared at the hard drive. This is enough to put him in prison. There's something else you need to know. Thomas, the lead investor, he's in on it too. What? Thomas and Gerald are partners in this. They're splitting the embezzled money. They plan to collapse the company, blame it on you, claim the insurance payout, and walk away clean. I felt dizzy. So, the insurance problem wasn't just a mistake. They were going to use it as cover for why the company failed. Exactly. And if you expose them, they have the resources to destroy you completely. Thomas's venture capital firm has millions of dollars. They have lawyers, PR firms, political connections, but if you don't expose them, you lose everything anyway. Nicole stood up. I have to go. Use the evidence carefully. And be safe. These people are more dangerous than you realize. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting alone with the hard drive that could either save me or get me killed. Diana, Nicole, and I met in secret at a hotel conference room 30 miles outside the city. Nicole had rented it under a fake name and paid cash. We spread all the evidence across the table. The audit, the invoices, the recordings, the email chains. It was overwhelming. We have everything we need to prove Gerald and Thomas are criminals, Diana said. But we have a problem. If we go public with this, they'll spin it as a conspiracy theory from disgruntled former employees. Nicole nodded. They'll say I was fired for poor performance and that I'm making up stories for revenge. They'll say Amber fabricated evidence to avoid consequences for her own fraud. So what do we do? I asked. Diana thought for a moment. We need to go to the FBI instead of the SEC. Embezzlement plus death threats equals federal crimes. But we need leverage first to protect Emma and Nicole's father. What kind of leverage? We need to get Gerald to incriminate himself on tape. Somewhere the FBI can witness it in real time. An idea formed in my mind. It was risky, maybe insane, but it might work. What if I give Gerald exactly what he wants? Diana and Nicole both stared at me. What do you mean? Diana asked. I call him and agree to his terms. I'll sign the false confession. I'll leave the country, but I insist the meeting happens at Data Current's offices. Tomorrow at noon? And then what? Diana arranges for an FBI agent to be listening to the entire conversation. I wear a wire. We get Gerald to talk about the embezzlement, the threats, everything. We get him on tape committing federal crimes. Diana leaned back in her chair. It could work. I know an agent, Karen Willis. She specializes in corporate fraud. She might be willing to coordinate something like this. But what if Gerald doesn't take the bait? Nicole asked. What if he's too careful? Then we're no worse off than we are now, I said. Diana made the call. Special Agent Karen Willis agreed to meet us that evening at the FBI field office. Agent Willis was in her late 30s with short dark hair and a skeptical expression. She listened to our entire story without interrupting. When we finished, she looked at each of us in turn. You're asking me to greenlight a potentially dangerous operation based on evidence that hasn't been forensically verified and testimony from 2 witnesses with clear bias. It's all true, I said. Agent Willis pulled out a notepad. I'll need everything you have. All the documents, all the recordings, all the financial records. My team will spend tonight verifying what we can. And if it checks out, then we'll wire you up tomorrow and see what Gerald says. I called Gerald the next morning. My hand was shaking as I dialed. He answered immediately. I was hoping to hear from you. I'll do it. I'll sign your confession. I'll leave the country. But we do this at Data Current's offices. Noon today. I want Howard present as a witness. And I want to see the withdrawal of the SEC complaint in writing before I sign anything. There was a pause. Fine. Noon at Data Current. Don't be late. Agent Willis fitted me with a wire at 11 in the morning. It was smaller than I expected, taped to my chest under my shirt. There was a tiny microphone built into a button. Remember, she said, your goal is to get him talking. Ask open-ended questions. Let him brag. Criminals love to brag. Diana squeezed my hand. You can do this. At 11:50, I walked into Data Current's building. I took the elevator to the top floor. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The conference room where this all started was empty, except for 3 people: Gerald, Howard, and Thomas. I stopped in the doorway. Why is Thomas here? He's a board member, Gerald said smoothly. He has a right to be present for official company business. I sat down at the table. The wire felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Let's make this quick, I said. Where's the SEC withdrawal letter? Howard slid a document across the table. It was on official letterhead from the SEC. It stated that the complaint against me was being withdrawn due to insufficient evidence. I pretended to read it carefully. So if I sign your confession, this all goes away? That's correct, Gerald said. And what about the criminal investigation? The state attorney general? Also dropped, Howard said. I have those documents as well. I looked at Gerald. Tell me something I don't understand. Why did you do all this? Why frame me? Gerald's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. The embezzlement. Hillside Consulting. Your brother-in-law, Paul. Gerald laughed. Those are serious accusations. Do you have any proof? I have the audit. I have the payment records. I have Paul's social media showing him spending money he shouldn't have. Gerald leaned forward. Then you have nothing. Corporate payments to a legitimate vendor aren't a crime. If Paul has money, maybe he earned it somewhere else. Come on, Gerald. It's just us here. You stole over $1 million. You got scared I would find out. So you decided to fire me and frame me for fraud to cover it up. That's a nice story, Gerald said. Too bad it's completely false. He wasn't taking the bait. He was too careful. The wire wasn't capturing anything useful. I tried a different approach. What about Emma? You threatened my sister. I did no such thing. You called me. You said it would be a shame if something happened to her. Gerald smiled coldly. I think you're confused. I never threatened anyone. I simply offered you a reasonable solution to an unfortunate situation. My hands were clenched under the table. The wire was failing. He was saying nothing incriminating. Fine, I said. Where do I sign? Gerald slid the confession across the table. It was typed on Data Current letterhead. It stated that I had fabricated all accusations of fraud and embezzlement. It said I had attempted to extort the company. It said I took full responsibility for my actions. I reached for the pen. The door burst open. Diana entered with Agent Willis and 2 other FBI agents. My first thought was relief. But then I saw Thomas's face. He was smiling. Agent Willis, he said warmly, standing up. Thank you for coming. This woman is attempting to extort our company with fabricated evidence. We're the ones who contacted the FBI. My stomach dropped. Gerald's face showed genuine shock. He clearly hadn't expected this. But Thomas looked completely in control. He pulled out his phone and showed something to Agent Willis. We received this email 2 days ago, Thomas said, claiming that Amber was planning to wire herself and try to entrap Gerald into making false confessions. We reported it immediately to the FBI. Agent Willis looked at me with suspicion. Is this true? Were you planning to record this meeting? I was wearing a wire to protect myself, I said. Gerald threatened my family. Thomas shook his head sadly. Agent Willis, this woman has been making increasingly erratic accusations since her termination. We have documentation of her instability. We have evidence that she's been fabricating documents to support her conspiracy theories. Diana stepped forward. That's not true. We have evidence that Gerald and Thomas have been embezzling money from this company. Thomas smiled wider. Then I assume you have that evidence with you? Diana pulled out her laptop. She opened the folder where Nicole had stored all the files. The folder was empty. Diana's face went pale. She clicked frantically. The files are gone. They've been remotely wiped. I pulled out my phone and texted Nicole. She was watching via video feed from a safe location. She texted back immediately. My backup drives have been accessed. Everything's deleted. They had better hackers. Thomas spread his hands. You see, Agent Willis? There is no evidence because these accusations are completely fabricated. This woman is clearly disturbed and vengeful. Agent Willis looked at me, then at Diana, then at Thomas. I'm going to need everyone to come to the field office for formal questioning, she said slowly. Thomas's smile never wavered. Of course, we're happy to cooperate fully. Agent Willis turned to me. Amber, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted extortion and conspiracy to commit fraud. She pulled out handcuffs. No, I said. This isn't right. They deleted the evidence. They're the criminals. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. Agent Willis was reaching for my wrists with the handcuffs when I pulled out my phone. The message was from an email address I didn't recognize. Check the wire recording. Look at the timestamp. I suddenly understood. Agent Willis, wait. The wire has been recording this entire time. Play it back. Why would I do that? You didn't get anything incriminating. Just play it back. Starting from when you entered the room. Agent Willis looked annoyed, but she signaled to one of the other agents. He pulled out a receiver and played the audio. We heard Diana entering with the FBI agents. We heard Thomas standing up and speaking. Agent Willis, thank you for coming. This woman is attempting to extort our company with fabricated evidence. We're the ones who contacted the FBI. Agent Willis paused the playback. So, how did Thomas know about fabricated evidence unless he knew the evidence was real? How did he know we had evidence at all? We never told anyone outside our group what we had. Thomas's smile faltered slightly. And there's more, I continued. When Gerald saw you enter, he said something. Play it back. The agent rewound the recording a few seconds. We heard the door opening. Then Gerald's voice, quiet but clear. You said they'd never figure out the hillside payments. Agent Willis looked at Thomas, who said, What about hillside payments? Thomas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The recording continued. We heard Thomas's response to Gerald, also quiet. Shut up, you idiot. It wasn't a full confession, but it was enough. Agent Willis looked at Thomas with new suspicion. I think we do need to go to the field office, all of you, but instead of handcuffing me, she gestured to one of the other agents. Read them their rights. The agent approached Thomas and Gerald. Thomas's face had gone completely pale. This is a mistake. I'm a prominent investor. I know people. You can't do this. I'm not arresting you, Agent Willis said. I'm detaining you for questioning. There's a difference. As the FBI agents escorted Thomas and Gerald out of the conference room, I finally let myself breathe, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The FBI detained everyone for questioning at their field office. We were separated into different rooms. I sat in an interview room with beige walls and a metal table for 6 hours, while agents asked me the same questions over and over. Diana sat beside me the entire time, advising me when not to answer. Finally, around 8 in the evening, Agent Willis came back into the room. She looked tired. You're free to go, for now. What about Thomas and Gerald? Gerald cracked, Agent Willis said. She sat down across from us. Under interrogation, he panicked and blamed everything on Thomas. He claims Thomas coerced him into the embezzlement scheme. and he provided recordings of his own. Recordings? Apparently, Gerald was keeping insurance in case Thomas ever tried to betray him. He had recordings on his phone of conversations where they discussed the hillside payments and how to cover them up. So you believe us now? Agent Willis nodded slowly. We're opening a full investigation. We'll be executing search warrants on DataCurrent's offices, Thomas's venture capital firm, and several other locations. This is going to be a major case. Over the next 3 weeks, the FBI's investigation expanded rapidly. They raided DataCurrent's headquarters at 6 in the morning, carrying out boxes of documents and hard drives. The local news covered it with helicopter footage. They raided Thomas's venture capital office in Manhattan. His firm managed over $200 million in investments across 30 companies. And what they found was staggering. Thomas and Gerald hadn't just been embezzling from DataCurrent. They had been running the same scheme at 3 other portfolio companies. Fake consulting firms, shell companies with relatives as owners, payments for services never rendered. The total embezzlement across all 4 companies was over $8 million. The FBI also discovered that 2 former employees from Thomas's other companies had filed police reports about being framed and blackmailed into silence. But those reports had been ignored because Thomas had connections with local politicians and law enforcement. The case became a major federal investigation. The media descended on the story. TechBurst published a front-page retraction of their original article about me and a detailed investigative piece about Thomas's schemes. But Thomas didn't give up. He was released on $5 million bail, and he immediately went on the offensive. He hired a crisis public relations firm that began leaking stories painting me as a troubled employee with a history of making false accusations. They found an argument I had with a professor in graduate school 7 years ago and spun it as a pattern of instability. The online harassment intensified. Someone published my home address on social media. I had to move to a hotel for safety. My ex-boyfriend Derek gave an interview to TechBurst. He described me as obsessive and vengeful. He said I had always been paranoid about being treated unfairly. I sat in my hotel room reading the article and felt my heart breaking all over again. Even now, even after everything that had been revealed, people were still willing to believe the worst about me. The legal process was agonizingly slow. Thomas's lawyers filed motion after motion. Every court date was delayed. Every piece of evidence was challenged. Meanwhile, Patricia and Stephen, the other investors, turned on me too. They filed their own lawsuit claiming I had damaged their investments by exposing the fraud. They said I should have handled it quietly instead of involving law enforcement. The insurance company refused to pay out the key person policy until all legal matters were resolved, so I got nothing. Diana was charging $300 per hour. The bill was growing every week. I was now $33,000 in debt on top of my maxed-out credit cards. I couldn't find work because my name was toxic in the tech industry. Every company that Googled me found articles about fraud accusations and federal investigations. 6 months passed. Then 8 months. The FBI was building their case, but the trial date kept getting pushed back, first to 9 months out, then to 12 months out, then to 14 months out. Thomas was still free, still running his firm, still wealthy. I was living in a cheap motel room, eating ramen noodles, and watching my life fall apart. One night, I sat on the edge of my motel bed and wrote letters to my family. Goodbye letters. I told Emma I loved her. I told my mother I was sorry for all the stress I had caused. I told them not to blame themselves. I had decided to disappear. Maybe leave the country. Maybe just drive until I ran out of road. Start over somewhere with a new name. A new life. I couldn't fight anymore. There was a knock on my motel room door at 9 in the evening. I ignored it at first. I wasn't expecting anyone. The knock came again, louder. Amber, it's Jenna. Please open the door. I opened the door slowly. Jenna stood there with tears streaming down her face. Behind her were 6 other people. I recognized them all. Current and former DataCurrent employees. People I had worked with for 3 years. What are you doing here? I asked. Jenna stepped forward. We've been watching everything that's happened to you, all of us, and we can't stay silent anymore. The group entered my small motel room. One of them, a back-end developer named Travis, pulled out an envelope. We pooled our money, Travis said. It's $18,000. It's not much, but it's what we could manage. We know your legal bills are destroying you. I stared at the envelope. I couldn't speak. You carried us for 3 years, Jenna said. She was crying openly now. You stayed late every night. You fixed our mistakes. You protected us from Gerald's temper. You made sure we got credit for our work even when you got none. We're not going to let you fall now. Another employee, a designer named Chloe, spoke up. We also found something. After the FBI raided the office, they took most of the servers. But Gerald had a hidden backup server in the server room. We found it last week. What was on it? Everything. All the deleted evidence. Every invoice from Hillside Consulting. Every email between Gerald and Thomas about the embezzlement. Every recording Nicole made. Gerald had encrypted backups of everything because he didn't trust Thomas not to delete the originals. My hands were shaking. Does the FBI know? We turned it over to Agent Willis yesterday, Travis said. She confirmed everything is authentic. Jenna grabbed my hands. There's something else. We found internal emails from 2 years ago when they set up the key person insurance policy. It was Thomas's idea. He had the same policy at all his portfolio companies. It was designed to trap founders and key employees. What do you mean trap them? Thomas would wait until someone became critical to the company's operations. Then he'd have a key person insurance policy taken out on them. If they ever tried to leave or stand up to him, he'd threaten them with the penalty clause. It was a control mechanism. You weren't the first person he did this to. I sank down onto the bed. All those months of being destroyed. All the harassment and threats and legal bills. And I had never been alone. These people had been watching, gathering evidence, fighting for me in their own way. Thank you, I whispered. The trial is in 3 months, Jenna said. The FBI is confident they have enough to convict both Thomas and Gerald. You're going to win this, Amber, and we're going to be there with you. The trial began on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Federal Court, downtown Manhattan. I walked up the courthouse steps with Diana on one side and Jenna on the other. The case was United States v. Thomas Caldwell and Gerald Hoffman. 37 separate counts including wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, witness tampering, and racketeering. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Family members and supporters filled the rest. The prosecution called me as their star witness on day 4. I walked to the witness stand, feeling like I might collapse. The prosecutor, a federal attorney named James Chen, gave me an encouraging nod. He asked me to tell my story from the beginning. I spoke for 3 hours. I described the firing, the insurance policy, the accusations, the threats against my sister, the evidence destruction, all of it. Thomas's lawyers cross-examined me for 2 full days. They tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. They questioned my memory of events. They suggested I had fabricated evidence. But the prosecutor had something they didn't expect. 4 other witnesses from 3 other companies came forward, people that Thomas had framed, threatened, and destroyed at his other portfolio companies. A former chief technology officer from a fintech startup testified that Thomas had embezzled $1.9 million from her company and blamed it on her. She had been facing federal charges for 2 years before the FBI's investigation cleared her name. A former vice president of sales from a medical device company testified that Gerald had blackmailed him with fake evidence of kickbacks. He had paid Gerald $50,000 in hush money before finally going to the FBI. 2 other employees testified about the key person insurance scheme, how Thomas used it to control and manipulate executives who tried to leave or speak out about problems. A pattern emerged. Thomas and Gerald had been running these schemes for 7 years, across multiple companies. targeting vulnerable employees who couldn't fight back against wealthy investors with unlimited legal resources. The financial evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had traced every dollar. The fake consulting firms, the shell companies, the offshore bank accounts, the luxury purchases. Gerald took the stand in his own defense. He lasted 40 minutes before breaking down. He admitted to everything. He blamed Thomas for forcing him into the scheme. He cried and apologized. Thomas never took the stand. His lawyers advised against it. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdicts aloud. Gerald Hoffman, guilty on 12 counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, witness tampering, conspiracy. Thomas Caldwell, guilty on 19 counts. Everything Gerald was guilty of, plus racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. Gerald received 11 years in federal prison. Thomas received 16 years. Both were ordered to pay $9.4 million in combined restitution to victims and defrauded companies. Both were permanently banned from serving as officers or directors of any public or private company. After the sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps with Diana. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. I made a brief statement. I thanked the FBI. I thanked the prosecutor. I thanked the employees who stood by me. I thanked my family for never doubting me. Justice was served today, I said. But it shouldn't have taken this long, and it shouldn't have required me to lose everything to achieve it. With the criminal convictions final, the civil cases collapsed immediately. The insurance company paid out the full $2 million key person policy to DataCurrent within a week. DataCurrent's new interim board, installed after Patricia and Stephen resigned in disgrace, offered me a settlement. Diana advised me to countersue instead. We won. $1.8 million in damages for wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress, and lost wages. The company also issued a public apology and a statement clearing my name completely. I used some of the money to pay off Diana's legal fees in full. She had never complained about the growing bill, but I knew it had been a financial strain on her small firm. I gave $100,000 to Nicole Bradford to help her start over. She used it to launch her own financial consulting business, helping other companies detect fraud. I split $50,000 among Jenna, Travis, Chloe, and the other employees who had pooled their money to help me. They tried to refuse it, but I insisted. I established a legal defense fund with $500,000. It was specifically designed to help other tech workers facing wrongful termination, fraud accusations, or retaliation from powerful employers. Diana agreed to serve on the board and vet applications. With the remaining money, I took 3 months off to heal. I went to therapy twice a week. I reconnected with my family. I took my sister Emma on a vacation to Hawaii where we spent a week doing nothing but sitting on the beach and laughing. My mother came to visit, and we cooked dinners together and talked about everything except work and lawyers and trials. I started dating again, slowly and carefully. I learned to trust my instincts about people. I learned that someone who truly supports you will stand beside you in the darkness, not just in the light. The job offers started coming in. 6 major tech companies reached out within the first month after the trial ended. They had all followed the case. They all wanted to hire someone with integrity and courage. But I didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I started my own consulting firm, Ethical Tech Consulting. We specialized in helping startups and growing companies build governance structures that prevented fraud and protected employees. The pitch was simple. I had been through the worst that corporate corruption could throw at someone. I knew what warning signs to look for. I knew how to build systems that made fraud difficult and whistleblowing safe. Within 6 months, I had 20 employees and contracts with 30 companies. Within a year, we had 50 employees and were turning away clients because we couldn't keep up with demand. The business wasn't about revenge. It was about preventing what happened to me from happening to others. I reconciled with my sister Emma completely. She had stood by me even when it was scary and dangerous. That kind of loyalty is rare and precious. My mother told me she had never been prouder of me. Not for winning the case, but for refusing to give up, even when giving up would have been easier. I never got back together with Derek. He tried to apologize several times, but I realized he had shown me who he was when things got hard. People don't change fundamentally. I deserved someone who would fight beside me, not someone who needed space when I needed support. 2 years after my firing, I received an invitation to speak at Tech Connect, one of the largest tech industry conferences in the country. 500 people in the audience. I stood at the podium, looking out at all those faces. I saw Jenna in the third row. Nicole was there too. Diana sat near the back. Some of Thomas's other victims had come as well. I told my story, not as a victim, but as someone who fought and won. I talked about how systems protect the powerful unless we force them not to. How documentation and evidence can overcome even the wealthiest criminals. How solidarity and friendship can sustain you when everything else fails. I talked about how the key person insurance policy that was meant to control me actually became the thread that unraveled an entire criminal conspiracy. I announced that my legal defense fund had helped 43 people fight wrongful termination and fraud charges. 11 executives had been convicted of crimes using similar evidence patterns we established. I talked about how fear is natural, but it doesn't have to be paralyzing. How you can be terrified and still move forward. The audience gave me a standing ovation. After the speech, dozens of people came up to talk to me. Some shared their own stories of being mistreated by employers. Some thanked me for fighting. Some asked for advice. One young woman, probably in her mid-20s, pulled me aside. She was shaking. "I think my boss is embezzling from our company, but I'm scared to report it. What should I do?" I gave her my card. "Document everything. Back up your evidence in multiple places. Talk to an employment lawyer before you do anything, and call me if you need help." She started crying. "Thank you. Thank you for showing us it's possible to win." That evening, I had dinner with Jenna and Nicole. We sat at an outdoor restaurant as the sun set over the city. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had just taken their first settlement offer?" Jenna asked. "All the time," I admitted. "I could have taken $600,000 and walked away. No FBI investigation, no trial, no media coverage. But Thomas and Gerald would still be out there destroying other people," Nicole said. "Exactly." We raised our glasses in a toast, to fighting back, to evidence, to friendship. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I checked my email. There was a message from the federal prison where Thomas was serving his sentence. It was a request from him asking me to support his petition for early release. He claimed he had been rehabilitated. He said he was sorry. I read the message once. Then I deleted it. Some people deserve forgiveness, but they have to earn it through genuine change and accountability. Thomas had done neither. I closed my laptop and looked around my apartment. It was nice, not luxurious, but comfortable. I had earned every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every photograph on the wall. I thought about the night I almost gave up, the night I wrote those goodbye letters, how close I had come to disappearing. And I thought about everything that had happened since. The trial, the vindication, the business I had built, the people I had helped. The key person insurance policy had been designed to trap me, to control me, to make me indispensable and therefore vulnerable. But instead, it had become the key that unlocked the truth. It had exposed the criminals. It had started an investigation that brought down an entire network of fraud. Sometimes the weapons people use against you become your greatest assets. I had learned that you can't always control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. You can choose to fight or flee. You can choose to stay silent or speak up. You can choose to give up or keep going. I had chosen to keep going, and that made all the difference. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever faced a situation at work where you knew something was wrong but felt powerless to speak up? What stopped you? Fear of retaliation or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps others who might need to hear this message find this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges. Share this video with anyone who might be facing their own workplace battles. Sometimes just knowing that someone else fought and won can give you the strength to keep going. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that justice is possible, even when the odds seem impossible. Stay strong, document everything, and never underestimate the power of standing up for what's right. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you're stronger than you think.